joining us from, rejoining us from after Tuesday's conversation. If this is your first time to join us, then don't feel bad. You can catch up quickly, I think, with what happened. As Mark said, we want to do mainly a Q&A type format. We had asked earlier for people to submit questions in writing in advance, and we have a few questions that someone did submit that we will try to get to if possible, and then we'll also look for your open questions. And I think those are all showing up live on the screen for everyone to see. So some of them will quickly, one of us will maybe answer in writing to keep the conversation going, and some of them might have to wait. As you know from hearing us on Tuesday, the implementation committee is just getting solidified. It has been in the process of being formed. It is not completely finalized, and it has not yet started working on the implementation. So a lot of questions that remain to be seen are part of that. But what Mary Stewart and I want to do today is take your questions about what do we think it might look like? What do we think? There's some really good chances that things will turn out to be. We're very much in a period of flux, and we're going to be in a period of flux. I think the goal is to have the implementation in place sometime in early 2018. That's really, really fast. Those of you who have worked on any kind of reform, and you may not be aware that these two task forces that Mary Stewart and I led over the past 2 years, that was an historically long period of time for task forces. And the good news about that was I think David Johnson and other leaders had a really strong sense that we were going to need longer to make these pretty serious revisions. And I would say we really are shaking the foundations. It's going to be a very different thing going forward. But we're in an in-between period, and we're going to be in an in-between period for a while. And I'm aware that there's a lot of anxiety around that. I have it. Everybody has it. There's a lot. Anytime there's major change, there's anxiety. But I have to say that I feel mostly excitement going forward. I feel more excitement than fear. I feel like these changes are really, really good ones, and they're going to take some time and effort, but they're going to leave us, I firmly believe, with more quality, more professionalism, more energy, more support, more accountability. All kinds of good things I think are going to come from this. So I'm going to pause, let Mary Stewart make a few statements, and then we'll start taking your questions. I think in particular, what I'd like to hear from you all is, if you're willing today, can you tell us what it is you're most anxious about? Because I think if we can start talking about our fears and our anxieties, maybe, for me at least, that helps me get them in perspective. There may be some things that Mary Stewart and I do know and can answer today that will help mitigate some of that anxiety. So let me go back to her, and then we'll start taking questions.
Sure, just a couple of comments to add. The board is very committed to this transition, and one of the things that I've heard folks being anxious about is there's not going to be a sudden change. The implementation will begin, and there will be a transition period, so it's not going to be just dumped on us and that's it. So that has helped me in my anxiety. And the other piece is, we may get some questions from you all today that have more to do with the implementation side of this. Please ask those questions anyway, and because those are important, they will be taken to the implementation group. That's something that I failed to say, at least on Tuesday. And any question is a great question, and particularly those around implementation too. Even though we don't have the answer, the questions are very important. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the time that you've taken to both read the report and outside of your day to attend this webinar.
Do you want to take question number 1, or do you want me to respond to that first?
You go ahead.
The question is, why would we need a regional certification commission person on the admissions interview? And I think the part of the thinking for that was, we're trying to do this whole process, and let me back up a little bit and say that I think each of our task forces had started our work about 2 years ago right now, and we had gotten started, and it wasn't long at all before we had a pretty strong sense that there was going to be a lot of overlap between the two groups of what we were doing and what we were proposing. So it started to make sense to us to think about moving upstream in the supervisory training process, doing better vetting of candidates, doing better vetting of the people who are going to be training the candidates, doing a more quality understanding of what are the real differences between supervising levels 1 and 2 and supervising supervisors. Historically, we have not distinguished, and we've kind of said, if you can supervise at all, you can help form a new supervisor. And those of us who've done it know it's very different from supervising a level 1 or 2 student. And it's not more or less important. Nobody's saying that, but it is qualitatively different. And so we started talking about how do we move upstream and place more onus on the organization as a whole to be responsible for picking good candidates, making sure that we're picking the right people to start training in the first place. Because those of us who've served on certification and have been at this for a while, we know there are people that get into the process that maybe should never have in the first place. They get sort of stuck in a loop, and it becomes very, very, very hard to get that person either voluntarily move on, or at the very worst, they just kind of keep going until they become an okay supervisor down the road, and we just kind of shush them in. And our desire to raise the bar on how we do it is not just on raising the bar for the candidates, the aspirants that we bring into the process, but to put some of the onus back on the centers that hire them and make sure that they're doing a good job of selecting good people in the first place. So that was part of the rationale for having a certification commission person on there, to have a fresh set of eyes before we even let someone get started in training. So it's not all that different from the readiness committee. I mean, ideally the readiness committee has that goal too, to help people discern, is this really a person who's going to be ready to do this? It's a bump up from that model.
May I just add and reiterate, if you've already done a little bit of that, Amy, is that I think the fresh eyes piece is very important. I've got an SES in my center now that came through our process. I like them a lot. And it really helped me, even in our admissions interview. I chose to have somebody from the regional certification committee because I trusted their expertise in the SES process already, and I needed that other set of eyes.
You want to do the next one?
No, I was going to ask if you do it. I'll follow up with the next one.
Okay. I think the same conversation extends to this as well. The outcomes and standards we're not changing the outcomes, and we're not changing the standards. There may be some revisions when we look at curriculum for training the trainers. So when we look at training supervisors to train supervisors, and when we look at ongoing maintenance of competence, is a phrase that we came up with early on, because my task force's job is what happens once you're fully certified, what happens next. And what we've been looking at is how that becomes an ongoing formative, that's a continuous process of learning and growth. It's not, I was certified in 1941 and I don't ever have to do another thing if I don't want to. Our peer review's been very weak. It's been down almost meaningless, except for the people that are going to use it well anyway. It's been meaningless as a way to shore up supervisors who maybe aren't doing everything they need to do. They aren't keeping up with standards. They aren't keeping up with current literature. So this is a way possibly of forming, there may be ways down the road where we ask for different standards and outcomes, but that's not been what we've been working on so far. We may be adding some down the pipe, but that's not what's happened so far. We took what we're working with now for the outcomes, and different people, we're asking for more involvement on who evaluates the different components along the way. I think that if that doesn't answer that question, let me know. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I would add, I mean, in terms of competencies, absolutely does not replace the outcomes, still have the outcomes. Competencies, I think, are a little more concrete in what is it that we're looking for, what is it that we expect. And the competencies will, I think, certainly they do connect with the outcomes, but they're a little more concrete in their expectation, more action items, if you will, about what to expect out of the SES to accomplish. You know, that is something that's going to be worked out. We spend a lot of money as it is now, the way we do certification, and the idea is that some of those monies can be shifted over. But we have this wonderful thing called technology, just like we're meeting now, that some of these meetings could be arranged by webinars, GoToMeeting, et cetera, et cetera. So cost is something to be looked at, and we haven't really looked at that in a detailed way.
Well, and I think I think I said this on Tuesday, and I in some ways don't feel like I can say it enough. We have wasted so much money on our certification process the way it is. Flunking as many people as we have flunked historically has been hugely, hugely expensive. Not just financially, but emotionally. It's left emotional scarring and baggage for decades. And so we're going to save a lot, not just in money, but in all kinds of things. And how we spend those resources, I think, is hugely important. But as Mary Stewart said, not only are we going to save a lot by not doing it the same old way, I think we're going to look at more modern, creative ways to save money going forward. Can you hear my fire alarm? The clinic's having a fire drill. So but I do need to answer the next one. So, can you hear okay? Okay. So are all current full supervisors going to be members of the national faculty? That's a great question. Everyone who is a full supervisor will be national faculty eligible. And everybody, no matter how long they've been, you could be supervising SESs for decades, or you could have never supervised anybody and be a brand new supervisor. All of us are going to have to go through processes basically to help ensure that we have the commitment and the credentialing to supervise supervisors. So yes, the answer is you'll be eligible to be members of the national faculty. In order to maintain that designation, there will be expectations. And so those expectations are going to include, they're part of the peer review, and they include participating in consult groups. And they could be remote. We're not paying for everybody to come and get together necessarily, but we're saying you have to use your peers for real consultation. And we feel very strongly about presenting our work to one another as colleagues and as peers. And this is raising a lot of anxiety in folks, but I just think it's kind of fascinating, because if we're trying to teach our students to be ongoing lifetime learners, and then we're saying, but we don't mean us. We don't have to do that anymore. So I think it's where we're looking for ways to, people will self-select, in other words. There's not going to be any committee of people that decide who's in and who's out. Who's in is who does the work. Who's out is who doesn't do the work. There's no committee of people saying yay or nay. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, and I think that answers kind of the next one too. I wanted to respond to the one around identifying centers of excellence. We've kind of done that informally anyway, and for me as a regional chair, there are the regional certification chairs that get together and talk about practices and best practices. So we've gleaned a bit of that information as well. We've also, we'll be looking at centers of excellence, but in addition to that, who are the theory paper folks out there in terms of readers and responders and mentors? So we're not only looking at centers or geographic areas and best practices, but we're looking at that in other areas as well. Let me know if there's more to your question that I've not answered. So thanks for your question.
I think I'm trying to move on to this next one here. New process will indeed raise the bar in ways that we may need to do. However, they do seem to be demanding what could be significantly more time and energy. At the same time, we're working to hospitals who are also asking us to raise the bar and do more with less. At what point do all these demands become excessive? Though you seem to indicate that the new process will be more efficient and thus save time. Not sure I believe that. Okay, those are a great question. And it's one that we have wrestled with the entire 2 years. It's one I think we will continue to wrestle with. I firmly believe, again, that the time and expense of the way we have done it, I think we've become almost completely inoculated to how much time and energy and costs, financial costs, time costs, institutional costs, we've just gotten used to it. We just have accepted that our system is the way it is, and we have not really stepped back and said, wow, that's really a wasteful system. This system is going to put a lot more effort, a lot more placement on the student and the supervisor and the center, but it's going to be weighted a lot more up front so that people are working on their competencies. They might actually spend less time out of town. They might have more consult groups. Okay, so for instance, I used to take my students all day, drive 2 hours one way, meet for 4 hours, two more hours driving back, once a month. Was that the most useful? I mean, that was 8 hours that my whole everybody in my supervisory group and supervisors were all gone off site. That's a huge amount of time and investment, and it wasn't always the best use of our time. Now, if you took that same, you had 5 people, 40 hours, 8 hours, that's 40 hours of personnel time away from my institution. If you took that same 40 hours and you used it for seminars and you used it for presentations where you didn't leave your site, but you presented to a group of people from all over the country that didn't necessarily know you, that gave you some feedback you've never heard before, that didn't like you or dislike you, didn't have anything to gain or lose by putting a hard question up there, that could be really cool. And that could end up giving us a lot more, it could keep us a lot lighter on our feet. I think we're looking for ways to save money. We all have the same problem. Nobody works in an institution that says, sure, take all the time you like to go do this training. We're all facing the same things, and I actually think if we are smart about it, we can make it go down. And as far as the demands becoming excessive, I actually think they're not. The demands are the same. The outcomes and the standards are the same. What we're trying to do is give a path to those outcomes and a path to evaluating and signing off and certifying those that's more collective and more responsible and isn't so completely weighted on that 90 minutes, that mystical, sacred 90 minutes. It's very sacred to me. I very much appreciate that process. But I think that we have put too much weight on that, and we have not been willing until now to back up and say, something's broken, let's fix it, let's improve it.
So what I'll add to that is, I believe that we are going to implement a near perfect product. If it's not perfect, we can perfect it along the way. And if one of the barriers seems to be time, we can address it. But as Amy has spoken, we've really thought long and hard about this, and it's rearranging how we spend the time doing what we do. So I think it's going to be just a great product that will be perfected as needed. Amy, I think maybe you.
Yeah, I'll do that one. Yeah, what we're talking about in presentations is a clip of your work with your student. So we're watching, just like you asked your student present their work with their students, and I presume you're watching the SES more closely than you're watching the intern. You're presenting, you supervising your SES, and then your colleagues are watching you and watching what you do and giving you feedback. I'll tell you, my colleague Bob McGeaney and I here at the clinic this past spring participated in a research project that Judy Ragsdale is working on with supervisory training. And Judy was on my professional development task force, as you saw, and she was pivotal in the writing of curriculum for training the national faculty. And we had to record ourselves and send it to a peer to evaluate and give us feedback on. Well, Bob and I have both been doing this a long time. It made us very nervous. I mean, we had the same jitters we had back in training when you had the old VHS tape, and I don't watch myself on tape, and I don't want to see what I did. And the same jitters that our students are having right now when they have to record themselves. But it was great because we were in a collegial relationship with someone who knows that we have experience and different theories and isn't trying to prove anything and just ask really great questions, and questions that honestly we would not have asked each other. And we have a lot of luxury. We get to supervise together a lot, and we're very frank with one another. So we give each other very frank feedback. nevertheless, this person who doesn't really know either one of us very well just had some great insights and some great observations. And it's just good practice to stay loose and be able to talk about why we did what we did, to second guess what we did without getting defensive or thinking, oh my gosh, now I don't know, you know. It's just good practice. It feels like being audited by the Joint Commission, which just came through here last week. You ought to be ready for it, you know, rather than just be constantly on edge and afraid somebody's going to do a gotcha. Just be ready to do good work. So that's the answer. Yes, it does say you'll be grandfathered in. What it means is you'll be grandfathered into eligibility. I mean, like I said, there's no all of a sudden you get this new badge that says national faculty. It's an informal designation. It may not even end up being called national faculty. That was our parking lot name for it while we wait for implementation to see how they want to call it. The point remains what I said earlier. It's completely self-selected. So it also means that people who don't have an SES in their shop, maybe they don't even have an SES in their state, can participate in the training of supervisory students by becoming a content expert, by becoming one of the theory paper readers. There's other ways to be part of the faculty, but that's by participation. It's not by somebody else deciding you're in or you're out. So that's the answer. Okay, one more question about the supervisory curriculum. The core curriculum for national faculty is going to be something that is very easily worked into your real life. It's not like you have to do this core curriculum before you can go anywhere near an SES. It's that you're agreeing when you participate. I want to be national faculty. So, and I'm brand new. What do I do? Well, it's going to depend on where you are, your center, how close you are to having colleagues around. You start working on that curriculum simultaneously with all the other stuff. It's not like you have to finish it all and then you can start. We had a big long debate about, I think I said this Tuesday, about, you know, how long does someone have to wait before they can start supervising? Well, we figured out there's no mystical, magical number of years that you have to wait, because you could be waiting in complete isolation somewhere, not growing, not learning, not changing, still licking your wounds from a bad committee process, and you pick a SES 3 years down the road with nobody else's eyes on that person, nobody else's input into that person. It could be a disaster. And there was nothing magical about having waited 3 years. So what we're trying to do is say, what's the point of how much time is it? What's more important is what the training is, what the ongoing supplemental pieces are, what the ongoing requirements are, and what the ongoing maintenance of competence. I think if you get that phrase in your head, the ongoing maintenance of competence, that was what our committee just came out over and over and over again, saying that's what we want built into the system that has historically not been built in the entire history of the organization. Once you're certified, you are certified, and you don't really have to do anything to keep it. And it's so minimal what you have to do to keep it. On the other hand, what we have to do to rein you in if you get off the rails has been pretty awful. So we were trying to look for a way to keep people healthy and growing and included in the community in ways that were responsible and reciprocal, short of ethics violations, because historically that's been our only recourse. There was no way to say to somebody, we think you need to work on this. Yeah, maybe it just wasn't, there were no teeth in it. There were no teeth in the peer review, and this gives us a little more oomph to the peer review. So that answers that, I hope.
Amy, may I add something?
Yes, please.
Back to the question around eligibility to be national faculty. In the proposal, in the report, it says that certified ACPE supervisors who have supervised a supervisory education student within 3 years of the date of this program is implemented, automatically recognized as a member of the national faculty. So that is counter than to something I heard you say just a little bit ago.
Yeah, I would say that's part of the fine tuning. Again, we were using that phrase just as a placeholder. The national faculty, there's no such thing yet.
Right, but I was looking at the process, and the process of becoming national faculty, whether it's named that later, is in supervising within the last 3 years, you are automatically recognized as a member of the national faculty. That's what's written in the report.
Yeah, that's yes and no. I mean, because I think what we mean by that is you still need to work on this process, and you still need to be able at some point to look at the core competencies and say, yeah, I meet those core competencies, and if you don't, we expect you to work on them. I don't think there's going to be some committee, you know, who's got that kind of time? I mean, we're all in the same boat. We all have day jobs. We're not forming some big committee to come and hunt you down and, Mary Stewart, you didn't do this. We're trusting that the people who want to do this well are going to have the integrity to go through the core competencies and say, you know what, I'm not very good at that. Let me call Mary Stewart. She's better at it. And let me do some work with it, and then let me run it past some colleagues. It's not going to be these huge tests and more work and all these scary things. It's going to be the stuff we spend a lot of time anyway, and we spend a lot of our time inefficiently, and this is trying to make it more efficient and give us more of a roadmap for what is it I need to work on. I've been supervising a really long time, but what's come along in the last few years that I'm not as up to snuff on, and I will need to do that. I will want to do that, and it's not going to be as it's not going to be as truth or dare kind of as it is with the certification committees, yes or no votes, and you make it and you don't make it. It's, are you in the process or not? Are you in this? Are you doing what you need to be doing? Do your peers think you're doing what you need to be doing? Fine, you're fine. If you're going to get off isolated and tell everybody to go to hell and you're not going to listen to anybody, then no, you don't get to keep doing this. It's a privilege to supervise the next generation, and you gotta keep the privilege. So basically a notation, essentially yes. I think maybe we've had enough questions from the same person. If you want to contact me, maybe personally later, you're more than welcome to, and I can talk to you about this more at length. I guess you could say, essentially, the idea of a notation being you've got to take this seriously. So yes, we are building things into the system that you will have to take seriously. It's not like our current peer review where you get together with your buddies, you chat a little bit, and you've done it. You send in your papers. This is going to be a group of people who say, look, Amy, you got to work on this, and you really have to do it, and I have to show that I did it. So yes, it will be like a notation, but we're probably not going to call it that. I hope that helps. What will the process be in the national faculty and national faculty? Okay. Are those who've been trained to run the test are considered national faculty? Is this the one we just answered? The one Porky DeVore? Or will all supervisors be everyone? Okay. Let me say a little bit more about that. I think we've answered some of it. I think most people were surprised to learn, at least when I did my research 5 years ago, only about 20 to 25% of all certified supervisors ever end up supervising in SES. And I was really shocked by that. This means that more people will have the possibility to become involved in people's supervisory processes beyond just getting on certification committees and saying yes or no. Part of the problem I've always had with that model is that I could send a student in to meet their committee, and they could be on a committee with 5 people, none of whom has ever supervised an SES. That's disturbing to me. That's how we've always done it, and we've always said, that's great, whatever we're testing, and I trust the wisdom of the group process. I think it's got some wonderful qualities to it, and I don't think it's the worst thing we could have done, but I think, again, going forward, if we're going to talk about distinctively training a group that's going to be the professors of spiritual care versus the people who are going to be who are going to be the professors of spiritual care in addition to being the practitioners of spiritual care. It's like having every physician that comes out of our med school here isn't going to be able to be a professor of medicine. They might make really good doctors. So that separating out who are going to be the educators and who are going to be the practitioners and who are going to continue to do both, because I like to think of myself as both, and I am both, but they're two different things. So the point is, it's going to be a process, and when that person enters the process of becoming national faculty or wanting to be national faculty. They could be someone who isn't going to be a hands-on individual supervisor of an SES. They could be someone who says, I would like to be involved with lots of trainees who want to focus on this particular branch of spiritual care that I'm really good at, and I want to be the content expert, and I'd love to be the go-to person for X, Y, and Z. And maybe that person is, maybe you are that, and you have some credentials around that, and you have some testimonials that say, yeah, you're the person that we need to call, no matter who you're, what center they're in or what supervisor they're working with. And that person is part of it too. The point of the national faculty thing is not to have a separate, you know, set of Brahmins and whatever the other, and it's not about that. It's about saying, if you're going to set yourself out there as someone who's going to train the next generation, you are going to have to commit to your own process of learning and getting feedback. You can't sit on the sidelines. We've all seen it. Any of us who's sat on certification has seen it. We've seen somebody come whose supervisor hasn't kept track of anything for the last 40 years and is sending a pretty unprepared student into a committee to let the committee do all the work. And we're trying to, that's not very efficient, and it's not really fair to the student. So there's a lot of big picture problems. That's why it's been a long 2 years. And there's a lot of things like that we're trying to really go after from the root, or go upstream, or whatever your metaphor is. Maybe that answers. I hope it does.
So, I mean, I want to jump down to sort of a comment and a question about challenges that are perceived that many SESs are hired into position at a local center who has one supervisor. They both develop blind spots, and these blind spots are only discovered in the 90-minute commission interview. So what thoughts have been given to address this dilemma? And I would say the way this new proposal goes is that there are more folks looking at the SES and frankly the supervisor at various junctures in the process than I think have been before. So you're not waiting until the 90 minutes of a commission appearance that there'll be the regional person, there are theory paper folks, there are faculty folks. So there are a lot of places along the way that beyond the SES's supervisor and the SES, a lot of groups and individuals are looking at this person.
I agree. I don't have anything to add to that. I was reading this other one. I wanted to back up just a second, if that's okay. My comment about the 8-hour day to meet peer group and spending time with supervisory students, supervisors, invaluable. Absolutely. We're not talking about ruling that out. We're not talking about taking out face-to-face by any means at all. Believe me, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about having options for how we get consultation for our students. So I will spare you the details of how many hours I feel I personally and my center have wasted in years past with driving, because this was the group we could get to. This was who was close to us. This was who was physically nearby. It's not the most, it's just not the most efficient. I mean, it's not ruling that out. So keep your heartburn and keep us on our toes about that. We're definitely not recommending that we rule out those face-to-face things. They do need to meet people from a variety of centers, and that's kind of the whole point. But I think, you know, I've not been a huge fan of this kind of technology, and yet I'm ended up a convert. I mean, I'm having a different conversation with Mary Stewart than I'm having with you guys, partly because I know her better. I can't see you all. But it's also true that she and I have a relationship that extends beyond this room. So I don't actually have to be in the same room with Mary Stewart to have a really important conversation with her, because the relationship's already built. So I think there's ways in which you can have a group. We're doing it with a group in Rochester. We've started forming where we're going to go meet face-to-face once a quarter, but because it's so time-consuming and expensive, we're not going to meet every month face-to-face. We're going to meet quarterly to to do that physical human bonding, but then on the alternating months, we're going to meet like this and see how it goes. So I think there's a lot of room for creativity. But I agree with you. It's important to keep the face-to-face, and we will.
So, Amy, I know you don't have the report in front of you, or you weren't able to get it earlier. Going to the question about the key curriculum 1A2, its first reference to ACPE supervisory consultant. Basically, it says present your papers to an ACPE supervisory consultant and, if possible, to a peer group of ACPE supervisors. So the question obviously is, who is that consultant and how is that consultant identified? What's the difference between an ACPE consultant and a group of ACPE, peer group of ACPE supervisors?
Well, I'd actually feel more comfortable if one of the subcommittee members who wrote the curriculum would answer that, and they're not on the call. I think that the best of my recollection is that that's also, and that remains to be partially worked out by implementation. Somebody from that work group will be on implementation. So it's about, there's not a specific job description for that person yet. What this means is there might be multiple ways that person would be identified. That person might be identified by the student. The student might say, I've heard there's so-and-so in this town or whatever, and I've heard that they really get this, and I'd like to try to work with them about it. Can I do that? Yes.
Okay, just to be clarified later.
Yeah, it's to be clarified later. There's a lot of, I think part of what the history of our organization has also done to us is we've got a lot of history of trauma, of self-inflicted trauma around, self-inflicted as an organization. Nobody outside of us was making us do the stuff that we've done. And I think we think, oh my God, more rules, more regulations, more stuff, oh no, we're so busy, oh my God. And truthfully, we're trying to save time. I said this on other occasions. For every presenter's report I've ever written for a candidate or an associate or full, I spent 40 to 60 hours, maybe more, because I didn't really keep track because it was all my free time. 40 to 60 hours on that effort. Sometimes only to have it not go the way we want it, right? And have the person, or sometimes to have that person fail. And there have been multiple times, there have been multiple times when I would, I would have preferred at every single one of those to have had 10 of those hours to consult with this person. I mean, you think, wow, what if this person got 10 hours of my time, one-on-one, over the phone, Skyping, however they want to do it. Wow, I could have done a lot more good and offered them some real supervision rather than 60 hours of my time to catch all the holes that are in the training and make sure they don't get turned loose too soon to do good work. So that's one answer. I think that we're going to end up finding we have a lot of creativity around this, and it's going to be more life-giving, more creative, more, I honestly think it's going to be less expensive. I really do.
So just moving on to the comment about all full supervisors, all CPE supervisors should be national faculty eligible, and it should be corrected. I would be interested in hearing, certainly offline or however, but hearing more your rationale behind that. Why do you think the way you think about that? What's important to you about that?
The person that's asking the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That all full or all CPE supervisors should be national faculty eligible and no automatic grandfathering. So.
Right. Well, even I would say about the automatic grandfathering that even all that means is there's no grandfathering or not. That's probably the wrong word. All that means is anybody who makes supervisor again, can become a supervisor, can become involved in supervisory education in some way or another. Now, they may not ever live or work in or near a center that has a supervisory program. So this actually opens the doors for people like that to become more involved. As I said, in a way that's much more, I think, productive, hands-on, time-saving, and useful than just saying, well, I'm going to get on certification commission because that's the only way, or committees. That's the only way I can ever be involved in this next generation of supervisors. Anyway, it gives them another chance, another doorway in. So I think that there will be more opportunities. We'll change the language. I think the language of that is less important than what the language comes out to be in the implementation phase. We may not even keep national faculty as a name. I don't know. It's not. We weren't wed to the name. The point was, we're not. The biggest worry when we got appointed. Maybe this is helpful. When we got appointed by President David Johnson 2.5 years ago, almost. A little over 2 years ago, as this task force, we were told very, very explicitly, do not add any certification. We're going to look at, we want you to relook at peer review, we want you to relook at professional development, but you may not add any more certification. So we said, okay, we won't. But we also said, how do we put some teeth into our currently completely toothless peer review process? Because people, as we said, I mean, people get certified. This was not a perfect process, and neither will a new process be perfect. But the old system, I firmly believe there are people that got through that maybe shouldn't have. There are people that should have and didn't because of a bad committee experience. Some people gave up and went away when maybe they shouldn't have. Some people stayed and didn't give up when maybe they should have. I mean, there's all kinds of ways in which this has not been a perfect system. And so having the idea of peer review have some real teeth to it, and having us have something that had requirements like notations. You've got to do them. We're telling you, you've really got to do it. We're saying this isn't just a suggestion. You've got to do it if you want to do the next thing. So it's not exactly more certification. It's not. So the language around eligibility and national faculty, that just means we're not adding another certification process. We're not doing that. And we haven't. Someone said it just sounds like more certification. I'm like, it's not. You don't need another committee. You can't get your credentials revoked, but you can take yourself out of the pool of people who supervisors by not doing your homework. Does that make more sense? Maybe that rings a bell. So it's going to be like doing your homework. Next.
Yeah, I just see a couple of comments, and it looks like sort of a little conversation around national faculty and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, we do have to find a way to hit the ground running with regards to national faculty, and I like your comment, Corky, so thank you for that comment.
Yeah. I'll respond to the Corky's comment too. No, we're definitely not going to leave people. I mean, people who are already supervising and have students in the process. Nobody's going to march along and say, "Oops, sorry, you got to start over. You're too close, or you're not close enough." Or we're not doing that. This is all done to improve it. It's not done to make it any harder. It's not done to make. We're trying to take away a lot of the trauma and the gotcha-ness of it, and the you can't do this, and we're trying to take a lot of that away. We are all facing the same challenges, and our organization is facing the same challenges, and we need to be more deliberate and better stewards of the gift that we've been given by making sure that we use the resources we have really well, including the very human resources of the young and middle-aged and older smart people who want to be supervisors and who want to do this work. And we got to make it user-friendly. We've got to make it more professional and more fair. And that's what we're working on. So we're not going to leave a void of unsupervised people. There's no hard and fast date that if you don't become national faculty by this date, out you go. It all remains to be seen, and it all remains to be implemented, but it's where we want to, it's where we're headed to.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on Diane's comment about the unfair and unjust, and I just kind of want to back it up a little bit to the way we do supervisory education and focus in on the first part of this report. And I think we all know there are a lot of variations in how we do supervisory education. And I've felt this and experienced this very real, in real time with the theory papers. And I think the idea is to live better in the tension of our individual personality, our individual creativity, our individual gifts, and within some kind of standards, if you will. So for example, with the theory paper, and I know I'm going back probably to Tuesday's discussion, but you know, a group of readers in one geographical location across the country may read it very differently than a group of readers in my area, or two groups in my area read it differently. So I hear the unfair and unjust, but I think we recognize that there are particular proficiencies to do to be a reader of theory papers, and or to teach content expert, and or to supervise SESs, and to be able to equip people better to do the work of supervising SESs, I think, and to give some kind of core curriculum and standardization is important professionally and ethically.
I would agree with that. You kind of froze on my screen, Mary Stewart. I don't know if you're still talking, but I would agree with that, because I think the idea was never to, I can sort of see what you mean by it feeling unfair and unjust. What I would offer to you is that as someone who's been doing this a long time and didn't have to do it that way, I wish I had, because when you are free to go pick whomever you want and run with that person, and you don't have to get anybody else's consult on it. And I've gotten consult anyway, but still underneath it, I knew I was going to do what I was going to do. Let's just face it. I think that that's been not the greatest thing. I mean, I've gotten students that weren't going to make it, and that I had to say, you can't stay at it after a while. I mean, you want to talk about painful. And I wasn't going to keep going and give it years and years and years and years and years and let the committees and the organization pay tons of money to keep running them through committees. What I said was, maybe you need to learn from someone else, not me. But I wish that I had had more checks and balances on the whole thing from the beginning. You can start right away. There's no hoop jumping you've got to do. I mean, you just start. You start the process. There's nothing in there that says you have to be finished with all these steps before you can start talking about having an SES. So if you have an SES, you have a chance to start with an SES at your center, and you're a certified supervisor, and your center is accredited for supervisory student, start. Because for one thing, you're going to have to start under the old process right now anyway. And we're going to have to come out with some kind of hybrid model for the in-between people anyway. And the new model, as I said, I have 4 right now in process, and they're probably, some of them will definitely be done before this is implemented. So we're in the middle phase too. We're also in the middle, and I'm living with the pain of that, and I'm going to be doing additional things based on what I'm writing that we all need to be doing. So it's not actually accurate, your concern. Again, please call me at some time if you want, and I'll talk to you more about this, and others if they want. I don't know what happened to Mary Stewart. I'm kind of worried.
Her computer froze.
Okay, thank you. So I'll keep going. Let's see. Pacific region. From day one, a peer review made it every 3 years. 5 years was perceived as way too long. If you're supervising SES, you must have at least one peer review committee interview. If you fail to participate, the peer review referred to certification. Most people in the region. Is it possible to have a valuable peer review? Well, I'm not sure I understand the question exactly, Rod. I think it is possible to have a valuable peer review if you don't just pick and choose your own people. I think Pacific region actually is one of the two regions, Southeast and Pacific, are the two regions that have done a really good job of peer review. So I should have said that from the beginning, that I don't paint everybody with the same brush. You guys have a better model out there, and I don't know how, how many people know about that. But I think you absolutely can have a valuable peer review, and I think those two regions come closer. I think what happens is they actually have requirements, and also I think as I understand what both those regions do is peer review is partially managed and set up and orchestrated by either the national office or by regional committees or whatever we're going to end up calling them. But those peer reviews get set up for you. You don't necessarily just lasso up your 3 best friends, but you get someone appointed who's not necessarily someone you know. And the feedback they give you, much like a notation, has to be taken seriously. If these 3 people say, we feel like you need to brush up on your XYZ, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. And we don't know yet what what if I don't? I mean, we don't know the answer yet. But the point is, if you don't, one thing that will happen if you don't, is you don't get to supervise SESs. If you're gonna model for your SES, oh no, you don't really have to listen to your peers. I mean, you do until you get voted on, and then after you get voted on, you never have to listen to them again. I mean, what is that? What kind of message is that? So, I don't know if that answers your question, but I agree with you. It is possible to have valuable peer review, but you guys are better at it than most of the regions. So we're borrowing some models from Pacific region and Southeast region, some of the stuff that you guys have been doing, and that's also remains to be seen in implementation. Yeah, and it is so for everyone. I will have to do anything that a brand new person will have to do. I'll have to do to answer that one.
Sorry, my computer froze. I'm back on.
Yeah, I'm glad you're back. You want to take the next one?
Well, I was looking, the last one there, the appreciative of the responsibility for training is on the supervisor. Yes, that will continue to be so, but I think that individual supervisor will be surrounded by other supervisors, faculty, because I think it takes a village, and very frustrating to spend the time reading materials, meeting an individual, an aspirant, we're calling them, and letting the committee decide. That's just not the way we want to go. So thank you for your comment.
I agree with that, and I've had, like I said, I've been on committees where I felt like, wow, we're doing all the supervisors' work for them. And then sometimes you're in the awful position of feeling like it's not even necessarily entirely the student's fault that they're not doing very well. And that's why this is trying to move some of the responsibility back onto the supervisory trainer and the center at the front end to say, if you're not equipped to train this person and prepare this person for the tests that you're going to put them through, then you don't get to do that. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the center. Or you do it with enough supplementation that you guarantee they will get what they need. And if you don't, and no one center has it, no one supervisor has it, it's just not, Mary Stewart, exactly. It takes a village. It may take several villages to raise a supervisor. So I thank you for that comment, because that's really true.
Just a comment, Michelle, I would love to hear how your peer review goes, implementing some of being creative and implementing some of the things listed in the proposal. So
yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, thanks for volunteering. I think it should be lovely. I mean, I think it should really be helpful. You know, get something you can sink your teeth into.
And then Corky, reciprocity, yes, that's something that we're looking at and have talked a lot about with APC, ACPE, and others in our kind of cohort. NAJC, I think, is one in ACC. So yes.
Are you answering this question right here? Oh no, that's anonymous viewer.
Corky, yeah.
The Corky's thing about reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, definitely. We want to use as many resources as we can, and that's a really good point. We would be using APC people to help do webinars, be content experts. It'd be all kinds of ways we overlap. I don't know if you know, we've always had, probably the last 10, no, I think it's been 12 years now, we've had an overlapped ethics commissions with the APC, and that was a pilot project 12 years ago, and it's worked beautifully to share resources and share personnel between the two ethics commissions. That is still going strong and has worked beautifully. So I think there's a lot of models, there's a lot of precedent for that. I was going to go to the anonymous one. It had kind of long. You're muted. There you go.
So we have just a couple of minutes left.
Oh, really? Gosh, that went fast. Yeah, good point. Yeah, no, we're not asking that's the whole point. We're definitely not, I'm answering this one from anonymous viewer about becoming experts in everything. That's the whole point, that nobody can be an expert in everything. That's our point. So this is meant to minimize, because truthfully, like I said, the percentage of people who supervise supervisors is very small to begin with. And then the vast majority of those are a single supervisor in a single center. So we're trying to cut down on the notion that that one person would have ever been able to do this in the first place. And we're trying to cut down on the number of holes and mistakes that inevitably occur when that's the only training supervisor that person really has access to in any real way. So absolutely, we're doing that. Thank you. And you do say it's a great idea. Thanks.
Okay, our time has come to an end. So thank you to both Mary Stewart and to Amy for your facilitation today and for answering the questions. And the recording of today's webinar will be posted on the website early next week. If you have additional questions, feel free to send them either to Amy, Mary Stewart, or to Mark, marc@acpe.edu, and I will forward them to the appropriate people so that we can continue to dialogue and give responses to people as we work through this process. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and we wish you all a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.